Here's my Trusted IDP configuration. I'm representing Apple via a link on the login page. The issuer that is required, I'm going to sign users into OneLogin. I'm going to extract TIdP email, which would be the default anyway with OpenID Connect, and I'm going to try and match to email. Further down here we can see the authentication endpoint that is used for communicating with the token endpoint to exchange the code for a token. We're going to use the post binding, and that is the endpoint we're going to use. Notice here that there is no user info endpoint. This is the key difference from any other OpenID connector we have with Trusted IDP. Apple doesn't use it. It returns the identity information in the identity token, and whereas we always pull the information from the user info endpoint and effectively ignore any claims within the identity token. With Apple, that's not possible because it's specifically with the issuer of Apple, we do not require the user info endpoint, and we just extract information from the identity token. Notice here I'm only going to use the email scope. In principle, there is an additional scope called name, which doesn't really work in the way you would expect, and I'll talk more about that later. Effectively, the response we're going to get from Apple will only give us the email attribute or the subject field. So in this case, if I'm going to provision using that information, I'm going to use the email only to work with. I can't expressly get the first name or the last name. So it doesn't matter what I'm using for TIdP here for first name and last name, because I'm actually going to populate those values with a transform. So for the first name, what I'm going to do is declare a variable that is of email, which is going to pull the email attribute from TIdP attributes, which is a placeholder name containing all the attributes available from the response. And I'm going to split the email at the @ symbol. So basically I'll get two parameters. For first name, it's the very first indexed attribute of that email parameter I've defined, and I'm calling it fname. So then I can set the first name to be this fname parameter. So I'll just extract whatever comes before the @ symbol. Similarly, for the last name field, I do the same extraction, but I pull the second parameter from that lname variable, and I'm going to set the last name with that. So that's the configuration OneLogin side. The key difference there compared to with any other social provider is that it does not issue you a client secret automatically. There is an additional process involved, generating a key pair and then using a mechanism to create a signed JOT token. That signed JOT token, using that private key from the key pair you create, is then used as the client secret. So that's been done for my tenant integration. So let's go ahead and actually test this. So here's my OneLogin tenant. You can see I have an Apple ID logo. So I'm going to kick this off. It's an authorization code flow over to Apple, where I need to provide my user ID, password. Now then, this is a specific thing with Apple, which is a benefit compared to other trusted IDPs. There is more trust here because Apple will not allow this to work unless two-factor authentication is enabled. So on my Apple device, I've got an iPad here. I have been sent my second factor code, which I'm just going to type in here. If you're not set up with two-factor, you will be prompted to set this up before this can possibly succeed. This is another way that Apple tries to protect your identity. So in the identity token here, if I share my email, then that will be the email claim. Alternatively, you could actually hide that with a proxy address. So what Apple does is generates a random email associated with your account. The application developer can communicate with you on that proxied email, but it can't be used for any other purpose. So bear in mind, a user gets the choice to do this. There's nothing OneLogin can do to control this. So you may get a proxied address, you may get a real email address. Once this has been selected now, from this application integration, so from my OneLogin tenant, I will not be able to change this unless I blow away that configuration against my Apple account. I will share my real email in this case. So if I continue, I'll get the identity token code, or the authorization code sent back, which OneLogin will then exchange from the token endpoint to go and get the identity token and then extract the information. You can see here an account has been created and been prompted for some terms and conditions that I've enabled on my particular security policy assigned to this user. So I did log in as user called mday@federated access, and you can see here the account that's actually been created has a first name of mday and a last name of federatedaccess.co.uk. So this ability here to just use the identity token instead of the extra call to user info, I say, is limited to Apple only at the moment, but that may be extended to other OpenID Connect providers in future, meaning there should be a tick box that would allow the administrator to define whether or not to just extract information from the identity token or to make the subsequent user info call as well. I did also say that Apple provides a name scope that can be used, but we can't actively use it. This is again one of the differences with Apple that makes it a little unique here. The original authorization code request to Apple mandates that we use this form post response type, where the code is returned in a form payload or a post payload rather than a query string parameter. In here, on first time access, if the scope did include the name scope, then you can see it's pulled out my first name, middle name, I don't have one here, last name, and this is an example of the proxied address. So it's made available in the initial response in a form post. It's not actually part of the identity token. As a result, this can't be trusted because it could be spoofed. We do not support extracting identity information in this way. It needs to be in the identity token or the user info endpoint.